Hi everyone. So this is a lesson overview for the first half of lesson 5, which is looking at the innate immune system or the non-specific immune system. As always, you'll be following along in your OneNote, completing notes as you go along. And the very first part of the lesson starts you off by defining what sterile means. If you come back to the Canvas lesson, you'll see that we talk about this idea of sterility at the very top. And the main point here is that sterile parts of the body are closed off from the external environment, meaning that most of the time, impending injury and things like that, that these parts of the body are going to be completely free of microorganisms. So the next part, I've given you this chart to fill in, and I want you to try to do this without actually looking back at the notes. How many sterile parts of the body can you actually name and non-sterile parts of the body? So hopefully when you're doing the sterile parts, you're thinking of big organs, things like your heart, your liver, your brain, things like that, your blood, because your blood is kept inside your blood vessels, and then some examples of non-sterile environments. So anything that's open to the environment, your mouth obviously being one of the big ones, your nose, nasal cavity, ears, any ear canal, things like that, anywhere that pathogens can get in. So list as many as you can and then come back over here and look at some of the ones we've missed. You can see here are some of the internal organs like stomach and intestines. You might think, why are those there? But think about your food. So your food that you consume generally is going to have bacteria on it, right? Like if it touches table or your plate, maybe that's not clean, there's bacteria all over the place. So you're bringing those pathogens or microbes into your body. One of the other ones here, reproductive organs, one of the main reasons why STDs are common, because it's a pathway for microorganisms into the body. So see if you can think of any of the others that I haven't listed here that you can add to your list as well. After you've done that, we're getting into talking about barriers. So what actually helps keep these microorganisms and pathogens, from getting us sick, from getting deeper into our body and making us sick? So you can see here I've listed some of the main barriers. Some are physical barriers and some are chemical barriers. And in your OneNote, I've given you a picture of what that looks like, and I want you to highlight the function. And so we'll quickly go over those functions. The first one being the skin. That's kind of your big one there. And I've written some notes here that you can summarize and copy down into your OneNote. So the skin is our first barrier for all microbes. And we do have microbes that live on our skin, and we'll talk about that a little lower down the list. But you can see when you look at this picture here that your skin is made up of a lot of layers. So first of all, you have these 3 big layers, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. And even within that epidermis, the first layer of your skin, you can see all these layers of skin cells, right? That help to prevent and make it much more difficult for microorganisms to penetrate those first layers of the skin. Okay, so here's some information about what those layers do, but obviously having these deep, thick layers helps to prevent pathogens from getting inside our bodies. The next thing might be something that's new for you. And so these are types of proteins called defenses. And basically they're involved in signaling some of our other immune cells, like our white blood cells and phagocytes that we'll talk about later on in the lesson. So they basically help increase our antimicrobial properties of our innate immune system, which we're talking about today. Okay. Inside the intestines, so because the stomach and the intestines are exposed to microbes and we have microbes living in our guts, it's important that the intestines act as a barrier to our blood vessels as well, because you might remember from grade 11 bio that our intestines and the villi are lined with blood vessels that help transport nutrients right to the bloodstream. So it's important that this section of the body acts as a layer, as a barrier as well. So you can see here that these intestinal cells are sealed really tight together by these tight junctions. There's also going to be mucus that's produced in these cells as well that helps to trap and prevent these microorganisms from getting into our bloodstream. So that's a really important internal layer of protection as well. On that topic, mucus is obviously one of our main barriers. So in many of those open cavities to external environments, you find mucous membranes and mucus producing cells. In our stomachs, you also find them as well. And mucus, like it's pretty self-explanatory, is going to help trap any pathogens that it comes in contact with. So that's why when you're sick, you produce extra mucus, extra phlegm, runny nose, lots of snot to try to help trap all those replicating pathogens inside your body. One of the other chemical layers is tears. So you might not actually think of tears as being a barrier, but tears actually carry enzymes inside them, and those enzymes help to break down the bacterial cell walls. And so they can act as a really important barrier to getting eye infections, because obviously your eyes are another part of your body that's exposed to external environment. So tears act as a way to help break down some of the pathogens that might be there. Again, you have bacteria all over your skin, including your face. So it's important that we have some sort of mechanism to help prevent constant eye infections. One of the other more common ones that you've probably talked about in the past is your stomach acid. So if you remember that this gastric juice found inside your stomach has a low pH of around 3, and that low pH helps to kill a lot of the bacteria that we bring into our bodies when we consume food. And the last barrier we'll talk about here is your commensal bacteria. So the bacteria that lives on and in our bodies. And so basically they help to compete with other microorganisms that might be trying to get access into our bodies as well. So you find this on our skin, in our guts, and obviously it has a really important function in terms of helping us break down food further, but also in terms of helping keep our internal intestines safe. Okay, so that's that section there, talking about the barriers of your body. The next part that I want you to consider in relation to one of these barriers is this thought question. So it says burning 21% of one's skin is considered a major burn and a life-threatening health condition. It requires hospitalization and treatment in a special burn unit. Why is a burn like this so serious? So think about that and what we talked about in relation to skin being a barrier, and write what your answer is there. If you're not sure, this is a good time to pop over in the Teams chat and pose a question to your classmates there. Once you've done that, we're starting to look at some more internal barriers and what happens if one of these external barriers is breached. And so to do that, come back to your Canvas lesson, and it'll talk about some of these internal barriers, and a lot of these we're going to go into more detail, some of them in this lesson and then a couple in our next lesson as well. So the first part there is this idea of complement. So it says the complement system is part of our immune system that enhances the ability of antibodies and phagocytic cells, and we'll talk about what those cells are, to help clear away microbes and damaged cells. Okay, so they're just chemicals that are released that help to activate our white blood cells. They also can help promote inflammation and basically are amping up our primary line of defense to help fight off any invading microorganisms. So that's complement. It complements our innate immune system. The second are these phagocytes. Phago means eat, and cyte is in relation to cell, so you can see that right here. So basically, these are cell eaters. There's a really cool video right here, and you can see the bacterial cells, and you'll see the phagocytes in action, and basically they're going to engulf and destroy some of those cells. Now, they're not always 100% going to catch these invading pathogens or microorganisms, and that's when we have to have our adaptive immune system kick into gear, but they are a really good primary line of defense that can help to consume and destroy some of those invading microorganisms. The last one is something that we're going to talk more about in our next lesson, and so these are the idea of B cells and T cells. B cells and T cells are in relation to your specific immune system or your adaptive immune system. So these are the ones that are helping to produce antibodies to help us recognize these pathogens if we get infected by it again. And there are also specific cells that are going to attack these invading pathogens. So this is just a quick little outline there. You can see it says B cells attack invaders outside the cells by producing your antibodies, and T cells attack invaders inside the cells. And you'll see how that's done again in our next lesson. Okay, after that, we're getting more specific into this idea of innate or non-specific defense. So there's really three big players that help out with this, and they're all in relation to our white blood cells. So we have macrophages, dendritic cells, and neutrophils. Okay, and so as it suggests, these do not attack specific pathogens. They'll attack anything that they mark as foreign. Okay, so this shows you here some of those kind of cells that are made. And we're going to just go into a bit of detail about some specific cells. So what I would like you to do to help introduce you to this topic is watch this video right here. It's a bit long and you can probably skip ahead to the parts that actually talk about the cells. So if you come back to your OneNote, I want you to pay specific attention to these three cells. So watch this video and look for when they're talking about neutrophils, macrophages, and natural killer cells. And I want you to just write what their role is in our innate immune system. Okay, once you've watched that video, we're just going to quickly sum up that part of the innate immune system, what they do, how they recognize foreign molecules. And so that's the next part you'll see in your OneNote, is this idea of how do our cells recognize invaders. And so if you come back to Canvas, you'll read this idea here of something called PAMPs, which stands for Pathogen Associated Molecular Patterns. So basically something on a pathogen that our immune system recognizes. So you can see in this picture here that basically any structure of a bacterial cell or a viral cell, our body can mark those as foreign. And so common examples, you might have parts of the cell wall. So if you remember back in lesson 3, we talked about gram-positive stem walls have this protein called LTA, lipoic acid, and gram-negative have LPS, which is lipopolysaccharide. So those are two molecules that can be marked and recognized by our immune systems. You also have flagella, or flagellin, which is a protein produced by flagellum. It could be any viral genetic strand of RNA or DNA, viral proteins. It could be parts of the capsid. And so anything that our body is going to recognize as part of a pathogen, that's what a PAMP kind of is. So write some examples of that down here. And then your last part of this lesson is really just summarizing these three key steps of our innate immune system. The first one being phagocytosis. Again, we watched an example of that earlier up, so you can see that video below. The second is this idea of chemotaxis, where chemicals are being secreted to help recruit more white blood cells. And the last part here is what's going to lead into our next lesson, is activating our adaptive immune system. So you can see right here, after our macrophages and our phagocytic cells consume parts of a microbe, it's going to present antigens or proteins from the microbe on its cell. And so those are called antigen presenting cells, specific cells of our immune system that present these antigens to our immune system. And then it says by presenting these, they can activate T cells, and that's what kicks off our adaptive immune response. And so you'll see we kind of start with this idea in our next lesson there. So those are your three big parts of how our innate immune system is working. Hopefully this all makes sense. Again, if there's any questions, as always, pop those over in the team chat. Thank you.